Hi, and welcome to the fourth lecture. This lecture introduces process, operation, and service costing systems. In this lecture, we'll look at process costing, hybrid costing, and costing for service firms. After completing this lecture, you'll be introduced to process costing methods and its calculation. This topic helps you to accurately evaluate cost in a large-scale homogeneous production environment. Secondly, you'll learn about hybrid and operation costing. This topic will help you implement a more practical costing method than the job or process costing approach. Finally, you'll gain knowledge about the costing for a service organisation. This topic will assist you to classify and choose the right costing method for a service firm. The product costing system ranges within the two areas of job costing and process costing. The job costing assigns the costs to each job. And the process costing system averages the accumulated process costs across all the units. For assigning process costs, two main steps are involved. First, estimating the total cost of a process, and second, calculating the average cost per unit. Process costing is mostly used by firms that do not have opening and closing work in progress inventory. But now, more complex process costing systems take into account the work in progress inventory. This is usually employed by companies operating in petroleum products, paints, and industries of that nature. So a key concern in accurate process costing is accounting for work in progress inventory. This involves three steps: accounting for units that are started in the previous period and completed in the current period, started and completed in the current period, and started but incomplete during the current period. Partially completed work in progress units are converted into equivalent units to calculate the per unit cost of production. Here, equivalent unit refers to the amount of production inputs that have been applied to the physical units in production. Physical units are all units currently in production, whether complete or incomplete. Conversion of work in progress inventory into equivalent units provides the basis for calculating product cost. Ending work in progress can be at different stages of completion with regards to direct material, direct labour, and manufacturing overheads. Remember, direct labour and manufacturing overheads are called conversion costs. Under the work in progress inventory method, it's assumed that direct labour and manufacturing overheads are applied uniformly over the production process. Let's look at an example to understand the calculation of work in progress inventory and equivalent units. Suppose we have a cola manufacturing unit. Now also assume that a process prepares 10,000 litres of cola, and at the end of the period it is 50% complete. The materials used are water, sugar, and some other ingredients. Since the direct material would be added at the start of the process, 100% of 10,000 units has been added. Hence 10,000 equivalent units of material. While for conversion cost, 50% of 10,000 units equals 5,000 equivalent units of conversion. Under process costing, 4 steps are followed to assign production costs to units. These are: analyse the physical flow of units, calculate equivalent units, calculate the unit costs, and analyse the total cost. For calculating equivalent costs, one of these two approaches is used: weighted average method or first in, first out method. Now let's discuss our next topic, hybrid costing. As discussed at the start of the lecture, job costing and process costing are the two extremes of the spectrum. Many businesses use a combination of job and process costing. This is called hybrid costing. Hybrid costing is used by firms that involve repetitive production processes, but produce a narrow range of products that differ in some significant aspects, for example, different material inputs or different combinations of specific production processes. For example, Harley-Davidson motorcycles are mass-produced and therefore would be more likely to use process costing. However, the bikes can be completely customised, making it quite unique. In this circumstance, job costing may be more suitable. So perhaps given the nature of mass and customised production, a practical option would be a hybrid model. A hybrid costing system is useful when groups of products are handled in batches. Batch manufacturing processes have features such as individual product lines, production in large batches, and they require specific combinations of direct materials and a specific sequence of production processes. Operation costing is an example of hybrid costing that involves features of both job costing and process costing. Firms using operation costing assign direct materials to individual batches, as in job costing. And conversion cost is assigned to departments or processes using a predetermined application rate, as in process costing. Now let's look at the last topic, costing for service firms. Service firms are organisations that deliver help, utility or care, such as hospitals or management consultancies. Or they may provide an experience, information or other intellectual content like hotels, restaurants or the theatre. The service value is somewhat intangible and doesn't translate to physical units. Let's look at the difference between manufacturing firms and service firms. The outcomes of services are mostly intangible, while manufacturing firms provide physical products. Products are mostly homogeneous, while services are mostly heterogeneous. Services are consumed immediately after production. This is the opposite to products that are delivered in the future. Services are perishable in nature and cannot be stored. Some services include minor physical aspects, for example, retailers. A unique feature is that this service is produced outside the service sector. For example, most manufacturing firms provide a service component with their product to create customer value. And upstream and downstream segments of the value chain also produce services such as product design or after-sales service. Cost classification for the service sector is the same as for the manufacturing sector. It involves classification based on cost behaviour, traceability, and the controllability of costs. We can classify behaviour of cost as fixed or variable. Traceability costs can be categorised as direct or indirect. Controllability costs are controllable or uncontrollable. This model illustrates the value chain for a typical service organisation. Like we saw with the value chain of product costing, the service sector also involves upstream, production and delivery, and downstream activities. However, only large firms may have upstream costs like research and development and design activities. Here, production and delivery happen simultaneously, as services cannot be stored. The downstream costs involve marketing and customer service. For service costing purposes, upstream and downstream costs may be considered as overhead costs. Let's focus on the value chain of a service firm that includes a product aspect. In this example, a wholesaler and retailer are involved in the following activities: research and development, design, and purchasing activities. As part of upstream costs, sales and distribution activities are production activities and costs, while downstream activities and costs include marketing, delivery, and customer support activities. Despite the vast range of service organisations that operate in an economy, it's possible to identify three different types of service organisations. There's professional service firms such as medical, legal, accounting, management consulting, engineering, and architectural businesses. Here, individual services to customers are provided by professional staff, and the emphasis may be more on how the service is delivered rather than what is delivered. Secondly, there's mass service entities which include bus companies, airlines, post offices, electricity suppliers, telecommunication companies, and public service organisations. Here, the staff are mainly non-professional and the focus is more on what is delivered rather than how it is delivered. Then finally, there's service shops. These are between professional and mass service businesses like hotel chains, banks, cafes, print shops, and car repair workshops. Here, the number of customers, staff time, and degree of customization is lesser than professional firms, but higher than mass service firms. The classification of these types can be differentiated by two aspects. Firstly, customers served per day, and then service features. Customer served and service features can be ranked high, medium, or low. Service features include contact time, customization, discretion, people and equipment focus, front or back office orientation, and process and product orientation. Now, based on the combination and nature of customers served and the service features, service organisations can be categorised like this. Customers served are low and contact time is high, then it means it's a professional service. Similarly, when customers served are high but contact time per customer is low, then it is a characteristic of mass service. When both these parameters are medium, then it's categorised as a service shop. The case is similar with customization and discretion. Professional services involve high people focus, front office orientation, and process orientation, while mass services are low on people focus. For example, they have high equipment focus, back office, and product orientation. Service shops are medium and reflect a mix of all parameters. Now we'll examine the costing system appropriate for different types of service firms. Professional service firms have zero inventory and limited equipment. A job costing system suits these types of firms as it involves relatively few clients, production process is client unique, professional labour is the primary cost, and labour cost can be traced directly to a job, and job billing may be used. Now, process costing is suitable for mass service firms as services are produced in large quantities, so individual tracking of costs is not feasible. Also, production processes are repetitive, having limited room for customization. Different services consume similar resources, substantial indirect labour, limited client contact, and costs are tracked directly to production processes. And hybrid costing is suitable for service shops depending on varying degrees of customization, standardization of processes, and traceability of costs. We've now reached the end of this lecture. Let's quickly review what we've discussed. Firstly, process costing is suitable for mass homogeneous production. This is where we looked at equivalent units and average per unit cost calculation. Hybrid costing involves features of both job and process costing. And service costing is about classification of service firms into professional services, service shops, and mass services along with their costing methods. Thanks for taking the time to view this lecture.